What shocking secret did Princess and King Charles vow to finally reveal, risking the very unity of the royal family? For decades, the royal family has been shrouded in secrecy, guarding its legacy with unyielding silence. But now, Princess and King Charles have declared that they can no longer keep this hidden. Allegations of manipulation, secret estate meetings, and whispered attempts to alter Queen Elizabeth's will have surfaced, threatening to unravel the monarchy's carefully preserved legacy. Why did Meghan Markle allegedly push for changes? What explosive secrets did Princess Anne discover that forced her to confront her own brother? And how deep does this betrayal cut? Stay with us as we uncover the truth behind the palace walls, where loyalty and legacy are on the line, and no one is safe from the fallout. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What if everything you thought you knew about the royal family's most sacred traditions was wrong? Imagine, behind the grandeur of Buckingham Palace and the pageantry of royal life, a darker, more calculating plot unfolding. What if someone, against the very principles of the monarchy, sought to rewrite the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II herself? That's right. Whispers within the palace walls suggest that Meghan Markle, once celebrated as a modernizing force in the royal family, allegedly attempted to manipulate the late Queen's will. According to sources close to the situation, Meghan pressured the family to alter Queen Elizabeth's private will, hoping to secure a larger inheritance or better access to royal estates for her children, Archie and Lilibet. But how did this rumor come to light? And why are Princess and King Charles speaking out now, saying they can't keep this hidden any longer? It all started with a seemingly innocuous conversation. Princess Anne, known for her unwavering commitment to royal duties and her no-nonsense attitude, found herself in the center of a brewing storm. One evening, while reviewing some estate documents, Anne stumbled upon a peculiar detail that didn't sit right with her. The wording, the phrasing, something was off. Being the diligent royal she is, Anne couldn't just let it go. She approached her brother, King Charles, who was equally taken aback. Together, they dug deeper, only to find themselves unraveling a complex web of influence and manipulation. To understand why this revelation is so explosive, we must first grasp the significance of the royal will itself. For centuries, the will of a British monarch has been shrouded in secrecy, protected from public scrutiny, and guarded with utmost care. Unlike ordinary wills, these documents carry not just personal wishes but also national implications. Titles, estates, and wealth all laid out within the intricate language of royal decree. Therefore, any attempt to alter such a document would be not just a family betrayal but a constitutional outrage. But why would Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, allegedly push for changes? Those familiar with Meghan's ambitions hint that it may have been more strategic than personal. Having stepped back from royal duties alongside Prince Harry, the Sussexes found themselves financially independent but far removed from the luxuries they once enjoyed. After all, stepping away from senior royal roles meant giving up much of their financial support. Reports indicate that Meghan saw the Queen's will as an opportunity, not just to secure the future of Archie and Lilibet, but to cement a legacy of her own making. Still, many royal watchers are left questioning, why now? Why, after so much silence, have Princess and King Charles decided to go public with this secret? The answer lies in their shared sense of duty to the crown and to the memory of their mother. For Charles, the situation was not just about money or estates but about preserving the integrity of the monarchy. Princess Anne, always forthright, could not allow such a fundamental breach of royal ethics to go unchallenged. Sources inside the palace describe a series of intense meetings where Anne and Charles debated the consequences of speaking out. Would it tear the family apart even further? Could it trigger public outrage against Meghan and Harry? Or worse, would it destabilize the public's already fragile trust in the monarchy? Yet, in the end, they knew that keeping quiet was not an option. They couldn't let this truth remain buried, especially if it meant compromising the Queen's final wishes. When confronted with the accusations, Meghan's team categorically denied any wrongdoing. In a prepared statement, they insisted that the Duchess never attempted to manipulate or alter the will in any way. Yet, insiders remained skeptical, pointing to the timing of Meghan's interest in estate matters, coinciding suspiciously with Prince Harry's growing discontent with royal life. Interestingly, one of the most vocal critics of this alleged manipulation has been Prince William. Although he has remained outwardly supportive of his brother's right to live independently, William has always been fiercely protective of royal traditions. Friends of the future king reveal that he felt personally affronted by Meghan's alleged actions, viewing them as a direct attack on the values their grandmother cherished. But the most shocking twist came when King Charles, in a rare candid moment, admitted during a private gathering that he felt betrayed, not just by Meghan but by the circumstances that allowed such interference to occur. According to those present, Charles was visibly emotional, expressing his disappointment that the dignity of the monarchy had been called into question. He spoke of his mother's dedication to duty and her unwavering commitment to fairness. To think that someone might have sought to alter her legacy was, in his words, unforgivable. Princess, and for her part, has taken a more pragmatic stance. Known for her unflappable demeanor, and believes that transparency is the only way to maintain the monarchy's credibility. In her view, the best way to honor the Queen's memory is to confront uncomfortable truths, no matter the fallout. It is this conviction that ultimately convinced King Charles to make the revelation public. Critics of Meghan have pounced on the story, accusing her of hypocrisy, presenting herself as a champion of equality while allegedly seeking personal gain. Supporters, however, argue that the entire narrative is rooted in speculation and thinly veiled bias against the Duchess. They question whether this is yet another smear campaign designed to undermine Meghan's reputation, suggesting that palace insiders may be using Charles to propagate a narrative favorable to the more traditional wing of the family. Yet, no matter where one stands on the issue, the scandal has undoubtedly reopened old wounds. It has reignited debates over the Sussexes' departure from royal duties, the strained relationship between Harry and his family, and the controversial ways Meghan has been portrayed by the British media. In the court of public opinion, the jury remains divided. Some see a calculated attempt to rewrite royal history, while others view it as a baseless attack rooted in lingering resentment. As the story continues to develop, one thing is certain: the public's fascination with the inner workings of the royal family shows no sign of fading. And with each new detail that emerges, the line between rumor and reality becomes increasingly blurred. For King Charles and Princess Anne, the decision to speak out may have been born from a desire for truth, but the consequences are already proving to be more profound than they could have ever anticipated. Now that the secret is out, the question remains, how will this revelation affect the monarchy going forward? Will it strengthen the family's resolve to be more transparent, or will it deepen the divide that is already formed? Only time will tell, but one thing is clear: the truth about Queen Elizabeth's will and the forces that sought to shape it can no longer remain hidden. For centuries, the royal will has been more than just a legal document. It is a testament of legacy, power, and untouchable tradition. Unlike the wills of ordinary citizens, a royal testament is shrouded in mystery, kept hidden from prying eyes, and guarded with an almost religious fervor. For the monarchy, the will is not merely a list of bequeathments. It is a declaration of loyalty, a transfer of power, and a final act of authority that echoes through generations. So when whispers of Meghan Markle allegedly attempting to influence Queen Elizabeth II's private will began to surface, the scandal threatened to shake the very foundations of the British royal family. To understand the magnitude of the accusation, one must first grasp the inviolable tradition of the royal will. Since the days of Henry VIII, the will of the reigning monarch has been sealed upon their death, locked away from public scrutiny. Unlike the typical process where wills become public record, the wills of British royalty are secured under strict confidentiality. Only a select few, trusted members of the royal family, key legal advisors, and the reigning monarch, ever lay eyes upon its contents. It is a tradition rooted in safeguarding royal assets and ensuring the seamless transition of titles and properties without the glare of public opinion. This secrecy, however, also breeds speculation, and it is within these shadows that ambitions can sometimes take root. Sources close to the palace reveal that Meghan's alleged interest in the Queen's will began long before Her Majesty's passing. It was subtle at first: questions during dinners, offhand comments during charity events, inquiries that seemed casual but, in hindsight, were curiously pointed. Meghan, with her charm and sharp intellect, reportedly began probing into matters of royal inheritance, the distribution of estates, and the mechanics of wills within the monarchy. Those familiar with her line of questioning described it as discreetly assertive, always veiled in politeness, yet undeniably probing. At the time, few thought much of it. After all, it was not uncommon for new members of the royal family to express curiosity about how estates were managed. But Princess Anne, with her discerning eye and unyielding commitment to tradition, grew suspicious. To Anne, the royal will was sacred, a final testament that should remain untouched by modern influence or personal gain. It was and who first raised concerns to King Charles. During a private meeting in late 2022, she confided her worries, noting that Meghan's curiosity seemed more strategic than casual. Charles, who had been preoccupied with matters of state, initially dismissed Anne's concerns as mere speculation, but Anne was persistent. The royal will is not just a document. It is the essence of legacy, and reportedly told her brother. If there's even a whisper of interference, it threatens everything Mother stood for. Those words lingered with Charles long after that conversation, but it would be months before he would understand the full depth of Anne's apprehension. As Queen Elizabeth's health began to decline, the murmurs within palace walls grew louder. Meghan, who had by then distanced herself and Harry from royal duties, continued to make pointed references to Archie and Lilibet's future within the monarchy. Friends of the Duchess noted that she spoke often of ensuring her children's legacy and securing their rightful place within the family. What seemed like the musings of a protective mother began to take on a different light when paired with her alleged interest in the Queen's will. At the heart of Meghan's alleged ambition was the issue of inheritance. Royal tradition typically favored direct heirs, with estates and titles passing primarily to the eldest children. For Prince Harry, this meant that his children, despite being grandchildren of a reigning monarch, would inherit less prominence and fewer estates than Prince William's children. It was an unspoken hierarchy, one that Meghan reportedly found unjust. According to palace insiders, she believed that Archie and Lilibet deserved equal footing. An ambition that, if true, would require significant amendments to the Queen's final testament. The mechanism for altering a royal will, however, is not simple. It requires legal consent from the reigning monarch and, more critically, the Queen's own willingness to amend her wishes. Traditionally, once the will is penned, it remains unchanged unless dire circumstances demand it. Meghan's alleged attempts, if true, would have required influence not just over the Queen but also over those who managed the estate, the very guardians of the royal legacy. Those close to the matter suggest that Meghan's approach was strategic. Rather than direct confrontation, it began with subtle influences, conversations with legal advisors, dinners with royal estate managers, and engagements with those closest to the Queen. It is said that Meghan sought to understand the legal limitations and possible loopholes within the estate planning process. Some even speculated that her legal background, though primarily focused on entertainment law, gave her an edge in understanding the intricacies of estate manipulation. What remains unclear is whether Meghan's alleged ambitions were born of personal greed or genuine concern for her children's future. Supporters of Meghan argue that her inquiries were justified. After all, Archie and Lilibet were part of the royal bloodline, and it was only fair that they receive equal consideration. Critics, however, view her actions as opportunistic, a calculated move to leverage royal tradition for personal gain. As rumors swirled, Princess Anne became increasingly vigilant. She began consulting with estate advisors and those privy to the Queen's testament. According to insiders, Anne's approach was meticulous, quietly gathering information, cross-referencing dates, and noting discrepancies in estate management. It was during one of these investigations that Anne reportedly uncovered something startling: a confidential discussion between Meghan and a senior estate manager. The details of that conversation remain sealed, but what is known is that it prompted Anne to confront her brother once more, this time with evidence. By early 2023, King Charles could no longer ignore the whispers. He initiated a private inquiry, summoning key figures within the royal estate for questioning. The inquiry, though discreet, was intense. Questions about estate valuations, document modifications, and inheritance planning were all brought to light. It was during this period that Charles allegedly discovered the extent of Meghan's inquiries and her reported attempts to influence estate planning. The reaction within the palace was immediate. For those who had dedicated their lives to upholding royal tradition, the idea that someone outside the direct line of succession could influence a monarch's will was unthinkable. Princess Anne, known for her forthright nature, demanded transparency. She argued that if Meghan had indeed attempted to alter the Queen's wishes, it was not just a breach of trust, but a direct affront to the monarchy's legacy. Charles, torn between family loyalty and royal duty, found himself at a crossroads. The issue was complicated further by public perception. Despite stepping back from royal duties, Harry and Meghan retained significant public sympathy, especially across the Atlantic. Any accusation of manipulation would need to be ironclad, indisputable, and supported by concrete evidence. Anything less would be seen as a baseless attack, a smear campaign orchestrated by the institution they had fought so hard to leave behind. But the royal will, with all its tradition and secrecy, held the answers. For Princess and King Charles, it became a matter of duty to preserve their mother's legacy. To allow any form of manipulation, especially from someone outside the direct royal line, would be to betray everything Queen Elizabeth had worked to protect. And so, the stage was set for a confrontation, one that would pit tradition against ambition, secrecy against transparency, and loyalty against influence. This was not merely a matter of estates or inheritances, it was a battle for the soul of the monarchy itself. To understand the whispers of Meghan Markle's alleged attempts to influence Queen Elizabeth II will, one must first step back and examine the larger portrait of ambition that has often surrounded her entrance into royal life. Even before she married Prince Harry, Meghan had always been a woman of vision, with dreams that stretched far beyond the sound stages of Hollywood. Her journey from American actress to Duchess of Sussex was not merely a tale of romance, but, as some insiders suggest, part of a larger plan, a strategic blueprint to secure a lasting legacy within one of the world's most powerful institutions, the British monarchy. Meghan's friends from her Hollywood days recall a woman with immense charm and ambition. She was not shy about expressing her dreams of influence and global impact. Long before she met Prince Harry, Meghan's charitable endeavors were strategically positioned for maximum visibility. Her work with the United Nations, her advocacy for women's rights, and her carefully curated lifestyle blog, The Tig, all served as stepping stones toward a larger platform. Meghan was building a brand, a global narrative that positioned her as more than just an actress, but as a changemaker with the capacity to influence at the highest levels. When Meghan first met Prince Harry in 2016, the world watched as the fairy tale narrative unfolded. The whirlwind romance, the grand wedding, the global adoration, it was the stuff of storybooks. But beneath the glamour and spectacle, there were hints that Meghan's ambitions extended far beyond the ceremonial duties of a royal wife. Palace insiders recount stories of Meghan's early curiosity about royal protocols, estate management, and the legal intricacies of royal wills. What many dismissed as harmless curiosity soon began to take on a more strategic tone. It is important to understand the unique position Meghan found herself in. As the wife of the Duke of Sussex, she was connected to the inner workings of one of the most powerful families in the world. Yet, because of her and Harry's decision to step back from royal duties, she also existed somewhat outside of its constraints. This duality gave Meghan both access and a unique perspective, one that allegedly fueled her ambitions for her children, Archie and Lilibet. Friends of the Duchess, who spoke on condition of anonymity, described her as deeply concerned with the future of her children. Having faced what she described as a hostile environment within the royal family, Meghan was reportedly determined to secure her children's legacy. To her, that meant more than just titles. It meant financial security, recognition, and influence within the royal hierarchy. The whispers of her alleged attempts to influence the queens will begin to surface during these conversations. Meghan, they claim, was particularly fixated on the idea of equality between her children and the children of Prince William. The structure of royal inheritance is steeped in tradition and hierarchy. Titles and estates are passed down with careful consideration, favoring the direct line of succession. For Meghan, this posed a significant problem. Despite being the grandchildren of the reigning monarch, Archie and Lilibet were positioned far below Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis in terms of inheritance and estate rights. This hierarchy, Meghan reportedly argued, was archaic and unjust. Insiders claim that Meghan expressed frustration over the limited access her children would have to royal estates and financial support. Unlike Prince William's children, who were poised to inherit vast properties and considerable wealth, Archie and Lilibet would be largely dependent on the financial stability of their parents. For Meghan, who was accustomed to the sprawling estates and glittering events of royal life, this discrepancy was unacceptable. Those who worked closely with her describe hushed conversations where Meghan questioned why certain estates could not be reallocated or shared among all of Queen Elizabeth's great-grandchildren. But it wasn't just about estates and titles. It was also about legacy. Meghan, with her background in media and branding, understood the power of image and perception. She envisioned a future where Archie and Lilibet would not only hold titles, but also wield influence. It was not enough for them to simply exist within the royal sphere. Meghan wanted them to thrive as global icons, much like the late Princess Diana. This vision, however, would require more than just royal goodwill. It would require tangible assets, secure titles, and access to the kind of wealth that could sustain such ambitions. It was during this period that rumors of Meghan's alleged attempts to influence the Queen's will began to take shape. According to palace sources, Meghan began making inquiries. First casually, then more pointedly, about how estate planning within the monarchy was handled. Those close to the matter describe her as particularly interested in estates like Sandringham and Balmoral, properties that held historical significance and substantial value. Meghan allegedly questioned why certain properties were earmarked exclusively for William's children, even suggesting that provisions be made to accommodate Archie and Lilibet in the Queen's will. The Duchess, as some insiders recall, was not one to shy away from difficult conversations. In private discussions, she reportedly raised the matter with senior royals, challenging the tradition that seemed to favor Prince William's line. Her argument, according to those familiar with the conversations, was rooted in modernity and fairness. She suggested that the monarchy could embrace a more inclusive approach, one that would recognize all of the Queen's great-grandchildren equally. To some, it seemed like a progressive idea. To others, it was a direct affront to centuries of royal protocol. Princess Anne, who has always been fiercely protective of tradition, was one of the first to take notice of Meghan's ambitions, and, with her sharp intuition, grew increasingly wary of Meghan's probing questions. In meetings and royal gatherings, and reportedly observed Meghan's pointed inquiries about estate management with growing suspicion. For Princess Anne, the idea of meddling with the Queen's will was not just improper, it was unthinkable, and confided her concerns to King Charles, warning him that Meghan's ambitions could disrupt the balance of power within the family. At first, Charles was hesitant to believe it. Despite the well-documented tensions between the Sussexes and the rest of the family, the idea that Meghan would attempt to influence something as sacred as the Queen's will seemed far-fetched. But Anne was persistent, providing her brother with examples of Meghan's questions and her apparent fixation on estate allocations. It was enough to prompt Charles to begin asking questions of his own, discreetly reaching out to estate managers and legal advisors to understand just how much access Meghan may have had to the Queen's estate planning discussions. The findings were troubling. It was revealed that Meghan had, indeed, held private discussions with key figures within the royal estate management team. Though the content of those discussions remains confidential, the implications were enough to raise alarm within the royal household. For Princess Anne, it was confirmation of her worst fears. For King Charles, it was the beginning of a deeper investigation into just how far Meghan's ambitions might have stretched. It wasn't long before the media caught wind of the internal strife. Whispers of estate manipulation and royal inheritance began to leak to the press, though heavily censored by palace influence. Royal commentators speculated that Meghan's American upbringing and Hollywood sensibilities clashed with the rigid traditions of the British monarchy. Others suggested that Meghan's desire for equality was misunderstood, that she was merely advocating for her children's rightful place within the family. However, within the palace walls, the situation was far more severe. Princess Anne's concerns grew louder, prompting more inquiries into Meghan's involvement. King Charles, torn between loyalty to his son and his duty to the crown, found himself in an impossible position. If the allegations were true, it would represent a breach of royal protocol unprecedented in modern history. If they were false, it would signify a catastrophic misunderstanding with irreparable consequences. The stage was set for a confrontation that would force long-buried secrets into the light. Princess Anne and King Charles were determined to uphold the integrity of the monarchy, while Meghan and Harry faced increasing scrutiny over their intentions. It was no longer just a matter of family conflict. It was a battle for legacy, tradition, and the future of the British royal family. Behind the gilded gates of Buckingham Palace, where the whispers of scandal are often swept away before they reach the marble floors, there was one secret too potent, too dangerous, to be contained. It began with quiet gatherings, unannounced and shrouded in secrecy. The setting was often unremarkable, a private room within Kensington Palace, the drawing room at Balmoral, or even the secluded corners of Windsor Castle. But the discussions that took place within those walls were anything but ordinary. It was here, palace insiders reveal, that Meghan Markle allegedly began her campaign to influence Queen Elizabeth II's will. The first of these secret meetings is said to have occurred in the spring of 2020, just as the world was grappling with uncertainty and upheaval. Meghan, still adjusting to her life away from royal duties, was reportedly keen on securing her children's future within the monarchy. Palace aides noticed a shift in her demeanor. She was sharper, more direct, and increasingly inquisitive about matters of estate planning and inheritance. What started as casual conversations during tea with estate managers soon escalated into private sit-downs with key figures responsible for royal asset distribution. According to sources close to the situation, these meetings were often arranged with little fanfare, sometimes requested with mere hours' notice. Meghan would arrive impeccably dressed, her demeanor calm but purposeful. To those in attendance, it was clear she was not there for pleasantries. Her questions were direct, sometimes uncomfortably so. She inquired about Sandringham, Balmoral, and other properties held in trust by the monarchy. How were these estates managed? Who determined their allocation? And most importantly, how flexible was the Queen's will when it came to adjustments? Estate managers, though initially unbothered by her curiosity, began to grow uneasy as her questions became more pointed. One senior manager, who spoke on condition of anonymity, described Meghan's line of questioning as disconcertingly specific. She seemed to have a grasp of estate law that went beyond simple curiosity. Meghan, with her legal background, appeared to understand not just the surface-level logistics of property management, but the intricate legal loopholes that governed estate transfers. It was during one of these meetings that Meghan allegedly floated the idea of modernizing the will, suggesting that it might be time for the monarchy to adopt a more inclusive approach to inheritance. The suggestion was bold, almost audacious. No one outside the Queen's immediate circle had ever proposed altering a royal will, not even for the sake of modernity. To those in attendance, the suggestion was borderline sacrilege. Yet, Meghan persisted, reportedly citing her own children as justification for such change. Why, she asked, should Archie and Lilibet be denied the same privileges as their cousins, merely because of geography and circumstance? Her argument was framed in the language of fairness and equality, terms that resonated with some but alarmed many within the monarchy. It was around this time that Princess Anne began to take notice. Known for her sharp intuition and unyielding loyalty to tradition, and had always been wary of outsiders attempting to influence royal matters. Meghan's sudden interest in estate planning triggered alarms for the Princess Royal, who believed that such matters should remain strictly within the purview of the reigning monarch and their direct heirs, and began to discreetly inquire about Meghan's meetings, speaking with estate managers and longtime palace aides to understand the nature of her inquiries. What she discovered left her both astonished and deeply concerned. Meghan's meetings had not been one-offs. They were part of a pattern, a series of engagements that spanned several months. These private gatherings, some of which were reportedly held without Harry's presence, delved into estate valuations, land ownership, and the possibility of altering certain clauses within the Queen's testament. According to those privy to the discussions, Meghan was particularly interested in the properties that held significant historical and economic value. Sandringham and Balmoral were of special interest, as they were not only iconic estates but also held substantial financial worth. The frequency of these secret meetings began to draw attention from other members of the royal family. Prince William, who had long been protective of the monarchy's legacy, grew concerned as reports of Meghan's inquiries reached him. William, who had always respected the sanctity of the Queen's will, saw Meghan's alleged attempts at influence as a breach of protocol. In private conversations with Princess Anne, William reportedly expressed his frustration, questioning Meghan's intentions and the implications of her curiosity. But it was Princess Anne who took the first steps towards confronting the issue. In late 2020, she scheduled a private audience with King Charles, determined to share what she had uncovered, and, with her usual frankness, laid out her concerns. She detailed Meghan's meetings, her pointed questions about estate management, and the unsettling implications of her inquiries. Charles listened attentively, his expression growing more solemn with each revelation. For Charles, the news was both shocking and deeply troubling. The idea that someone would attempt to influence the Queen's will, especially someone outside the direct line of succession, bordered on treasonous. Yet, the allegations were serious enough that they could not be ignored. Charles, cautious as ever, insisted on further investigation before any action could be taken, and agreed, but she warned him that time was of the essence. If Meghan's ambitions went unchecked, there was no telling how far the influence might reach. The next phase of the secret meetings unfolded quietly. Under Charles's directive, palace aides began to monitor estate discussions more closely. Private meetings were cataloged, and the details of conversations were discreetly noted. Meghan, however, seemed undeterred. According to palace sources, she continued her inquiries, now shifting her focus towards legal loopholes within the royal estate structure. These conversations grew more frequent, with Meghan often citing her children's legacy as the motivation behind her questions. Behind closed doors, Charles and Anne strategized. They knew that addressing the issue publicly could ignite a firestorm of media scrutiny and further strain relations with Harry and Meghan. Yet, doing nothing would risk the integrity of the monarchy and, perhaps more importantly, the sanctity of the Queen's final wishes. And ever the pragmatist suggested a private intervention, one that would allow Meghan to clarify her intentions without the spectacle of public scandal. The intervention was planned with meticulous precision. Only a handful of senior royals were present: Charles and Prince William, and a trusted legal advisor. Meghan was summoned under the guise of estate planning, unaware of the true purpose of the meeting. When she arrived, the atmosphere was notably tense. Charles, always one to approach conflict with diplomacy, began with pleasantries before easing into the true matter at hand. "We understand you have shown considerable interest in the Queen's estate," Charles began, his tone measured but firm. Meghan, poised and composed, acknowledged her interest, explaining that she simply wanted to understand how Archie and Lilibet might be accommodated in the future. Her response, though calm, did little to assuage the concerns of those in the room. Princess, and never one to mince words, pressed further. "Is it just understanding you're after, or are you seeking change?" she asked pointedly. Meghan, taken slightly aback, hesitated before responding. "I don't see why tradition cannot evolve," she replied. "Why shouldn't all of the Queen's great-grandchildren benefit equally?" The room fell silent. William exchanged a glance with Anne, and Charles's expression hardened. Meghan's ambitions were clear, and for the first time, they were spoken aloud. The meeting ended without resolution, but the message was unmistakable. Meghan's vision for her children went far beyond titles and ceremonies. It reached into the very heart of the Queen's legacy. For Charles and Anne, the path forward was clear. Measures would need to be taken to protect the will from external influence, no matter the cost. For Meghan, the confrontation only solidified her resolve. She was determined that Archie and Lilibet would receive their rightful place, even if it meant challenging centuries of tradition. Princess Anne had always been the quiet strength of the British royal family. She was the workhorse, the one who shunned the glamour of the limelight in favor of diligent service. While others chased headlines and public adoration and remained steadfast, often the first to arrive at royal engagements and the last to leave. It was this sense of duty, this unwavering commitment to tradition and integrity, that made her the perfect guardian of royal secrets. And it was also what placed her at the heart of one of the most shocking revelations the monarchy had ever faced. The story of Princess Anne's discovery began with what seemed like an ordinary morning at Balmoral. The estate was shrouded in mist, its gardens glistening with dew as the sun began to peek through the clouds. And who often preferred the solitude of early mornings, was in the library, going through estate documents as part of her routine responsibilities. Balmoral, after all, was more than just a royal retreat. It was a living testament to the legacy of Queen Victoria and a symbol of continuity for the royal family. Its management was something Anne took personally, ensuring every ledger, every document, was meticulously accounted for. That morning, however, was different. As Anne flipped through pages of estate records, something unusual caught her eye. It was a notation, small and easily missed, in the margins of a financial ledger. The entry, marked with a subtle asterisk, referenced a meeting with estate planners concerning the future allocation of assets. It wasn't the notation itself that was alarming, but rather the names listed in attendance. Meghan Markle, 2 senior estate managers, and, curiously, a private legal consultant not typically associated with royal affairs. Anne's instincts kicked in immediately. She was well-versed in estate planning and knew that such meetings were rare, especially with external legal advisors. Meghan's presence was not entirely unexpected. After all, she was still part of the family despite stepping back from royal duties. But the secrecy of the meeting was troubling. Why would Meghan, who had publicly distanced herself from royal obligations, be involved in estate planning? And why were these meetings happening without the knowledge of senior royals like herself or Prince William? Anne's mind raced with possibilities. She knew she needed more information, but also understood that approaching the matter too directly could raise suspicions and force those involved to go even deeper underground. So, she did what she did best, she observed. Over the next few weeks, and quietly monitored estate communications, reviewing documents and speaking discreetly with long-serving staff who had earned her trust. What she uncovered painted a picture far more complex than she had anticipated. It started with whispers, hushed conversations in corridors, documents shuffled hurriedly away when she entered a room, and a noticeable tension among estate managers. And sharp as ever, began to piece together the puzzle. Meghan's meetings with estate planners had been ongoing for months, often held in private quarters and at odd hours to avoid detection. And the nature of these discussions? Estate allocations and inheritance adjustments, all under the guise of securing the future of Archie and Lilibet. And was stunned. Royal wills were sacred, sealed documents that represented not just financial distribution but the legacy of the monarchy itself. To alter them, to even suggest alterations, was to challenge centuries of tradition. Yet, according to what and was uncovering, Meghan had not only inquired, but had allegedly proposed changes that would secure more substantial estates for her children, despite royal protocols favoring direct heirs. It was a bold move, one that bordered on treasonous within the context of royal ethics. And knew she could not confront Meghan directly, not yet. She needed more proof, something undeniable that would force King Charles to act. Over the next several weeks, and expanded her investigation, quietly collaborating with trusted estate managers to retrieve records of meetings and conversations. What she found was alarming. Meghan had not only held private discussions with estate managers, but had also engaged with external legal consultants specializing in estate law. These consultants, and discovered, had ties to firms known for restructuring large family estates. The implications were clear. Meghan was building a strategy, one that could potentially reshape the distribution of royal assets. The breaking point came when an uncovered correspondence between Meghan and one of the senior estate managers. The letters, carefully preserved in digital records, detailed requests for evaluations of certain properties, specifically Sandringham and Balmoral. Meghan had allegedly asked for detailed breakdowns of their valuations and future income projections. Even more concerning was a line that referenced potential adjustments to the inheritance structure, citing the modernization of royal practices as justification. For Charles, the decision was immediate. Measures had to be taken to secure the Queen's will, to lock down estate planning, and to ensure that no external influence could alter its contents. Princess, and ever the strategist, suggested a formal review of all estate discussions that had occurred in the past 2 years. It would be handled discreetly, of course, but thoroughly. Charles agreed, appointing a trusted legal advisor to oversee the process and report back directly to him and Anne. The investigation began quietly, with records pulled from estate offices across Windsor, Sandringham, and Balmoral. Staff members were interviewed, documents were scrutinized, and Meghan's involvement was mapped with exacting detail. What emerged was a network of influence that extended further than anyone had realized. Meghan had not only been meeting with estate planners, but had also been in touch with trust managers responsible for the Queen's private assets. Her questions were methodical, focused on loopholes, transfer protocols, and the flexibility of royal inheritance laws. Anne's instincts had been right all along. Meghan's ambitions were not confined to mere curiosity. They were part of a calculated effort to secure a legacy for her children that went beyond traditional royal allocations. But more troubling was the implication that she had been working quietly, behind closed doors, with legal consultants who specialized in restructuring family wealth. The revelations sent shockwaves through the palace. King Charles, who had always prided himself on upholding the traditions of his mother, was forced to take action. Quietly, a lockdown was placed on all estate discussions. Any meeting regarding royal assets now required direct approval from Charles or Anne, and Meghan's access to estate planners was limited. It was a calculated move, designed to prevent any further influence while minimizing public scrutiny. But the damage had been done. The seeds of distrust had been sown, not just between Meghan and the royal institution, but within the family itself. William, who had been briefed on the situation, was livid, describing Meghan's actions as a betrayal of trust. Kate, too, was reportedly stunned by the extent of Meghan's inquiries, viewing it as a blatant disregard for royal tradition. For Anne, the discovery was both a vindication and a warning. Her instincts had been right, but the cost of uncovering the truth was yet to be seen. The monarchy, already strained by years of controversy, now faced another internal battle, one that threatened to unravel the very fabric of trust that held the family together. The stage was set for confrontation, and Charles were resolute, determined to protect the Queen's legacy at all costs. Meghan, now aware of the growing scrutiny, found herself isolated, her ambitions exposed. The question that lingered was simple yet profound. How far was Meghan willing to go to secure her children's place in the monarchy, and how much was the royal family willing to sacrifice to stop her? For decades, King Charles had been known as a man of patience and restraint. Unlike his father, who ruled with stern authority, or his mother, who governed with quiet dignity, Charles had always been seen as the bridge between tradition and modernity. His approach was measured, deliberate, often veiled in diplomacy. But this time, something was different. This time, Charles was not just a monarch, he was a father, a brother, and a son whose family legacy was under threat. And for the first time since assuming the throne, King Charles knew he had to speak out. The decision did not come easily. Charles was acutely aware of the consequences of public confrontation within the royal family. The mere whisper of discord had historically set off waves of scandal, sparking tabloid frenzies and fueling public debate over the very necessity of the monarchy. But this situation, Meghan's alleged attempts to influence the Queen's will, was not just about family disagreements. It was about legacy, power, and the preservation of royal tradition. For Charles, remaining silent was no longer an option. The first signs that something was brewing came in the form of subtle shifts in royal communications. Palace aides, typically reserved and calculated in their responses to media inquiries, began dropping hints of an upcoming address. Invitations were sent to members of the press, marked with the royal seal and stamped with urgency. Rumors began to swirl. Had King Charles finally decided to break his silence? Would he address the whispers of Meghan's influence? The anticipation grew with each passing day. On a crisp autumn morning, the gates of Buckingham Palace opened to a flurry of reporters and photographers. Cameramen jostled for position, microphones were tested and retested, and the hum of anticipation hung thick in the air. It had been years since a royal press conference of this magnitude had been called. The last time Charles had faced the public in such a capacity was during the tumultuous period following Princess Diana's tragic death. Now, once again, the world waited for him to speak, not out of tragedy, but out of necessity. King Charles stepped onto the dais with measured grace, his expression a mix of resolve and sadness. He was dressed impeccably, his dark suit tailored to perfection, but there was a heaviness in his eyes that betrayed his usual stoic demeanor. The press room fell silent, cameras clicked in hushed bursts, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Charles cleared his throat, adjusted the microphone, and began. "Today, I speak not just as your king," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, "but as a son who carries the legacy of his mother, a legacy built on trust, integrity, and unyielding devotion to this nation." His eyes scanned the room, pausing briefly as if to measure the weight of his next words. "It has come to my attention that certain matters concerning the Queen's will have been called into question. It is a matter I cannot ignore, and I feel it is my duty to address these concerns openly and honestly." The room was still. Not a cough, not a whisper, just the collective anticipation of what would come next. Charles continued, his voice gaining strength. "The sanctity of my mother's legacy is something I hold sacred. Her wishes, as expressed through her will, are a reflection of her life's work, her dedication to this family and to this country. Any attempts to influence or alter those wishes are not just a betrayal of her memory. They are a betrayal of the institution itself." Reporters scribbled furiously, pens scratching across notepads with feverish intensity. The king's words were measured but firm, leaving no room for interpretation. He did not name names, but the implications were clear. Meghan's alleged attempts to sway estate decisions had reached the very highest echelons of royal power, and Charles was not willing to let it go unchecked. "As king," he continued, his gaze unwavering, "I have a duty to protect the legacy of my mother and the future of the monarchy. I will not allow personal ambition to disrupt the sanctity of our traditions, nor will I permit any influence that seeks to undermine the trust placed in us by the people of this nation." His hands, clasped tightly on the podium, trembled slightly, an uncharacteristic display of emotion for a man known for his composure. The room erupted in a flurry of questions, cameras flashing as reporters shouted to be heard. "Your Majesty, are you suggesting there was an attempt to alter the Queen's will?" one voice called out above the rest. Charles raised his hand, and silence fell once more. "I am suggesting," he said carefully, "that certain matters have come to light that require further examination. We are currently undertaking a thorough review to ensure that my mother's final wishes are honored without compromise or corruption." It was a calculated move, one that promised action without directly accusing any individual. Yet, for those familiar with royal politics, the message was clear. Charles had drawn a line in the sand, and it was a line that Meghan, knowingly or unknowingly, had crossed. The aftermath of Charles's announcement was immediate. News channels around the world ran headlines of the king's address, speculating on the implications of his words. Royal commentators dissected every phrase, searching for hidden meanings and veiled accusations. Pundits debated the fallout, with some suggesting that this was the beginning of a formal investigation into Meghan's actions, while others claimed it was merely a public relations move to quell growing discontent within the family. Within the palace walls, however, the atmosphere was markedly different. Those loyal to the king expressed quiet relief. For too long, whispers of manipulation and estate tampering had lingered in hushed conversations, tainting the memory of Queen Elizabeth. Now, finally, there was a sense of resolution, a promise that the sanctity of her will would be preserved. Princess Anne, who had been instrumental in bringing the matter to light, reportedly expressed her support for her brother's decision. In private, she confided to close friends that Charles's address was long overdue. Meghan and Harry, on the other hand, were notably silent. Despite the media storm that followed Charles's announcement, there were no statements from their representatives, no public appearances to address the allegations. Some speculated that this was a strategic move, an attempt to weather the storm without adding fuel to the fire. Others, however, suggested that the Sussexes were reeling from the sudden shift in narrative, a narrative they had worked tirelessly to control. Charles's decision to speak out had also solidified his standing within the royal family. For years, questions had lingered over his ability to lead with the same strength and conviction as his mother. But this act of defiance, this public acknowledgement of potential betrayal, had proven his resolve. It was a defining moment, not just for his reign, but for the legacy of the monarchy itself. Yet, despite the king's bold address, questions remained. How deep did the attempts to influence the will go? Who else was involved? And most importantly, would there be consequences for those who sought to manipulate the legacy of Queen Elizabeth? For now, Charles had bought himself time, but it was clear that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would pit ambition against tradition, secrecy against transparency, and family against family. And while the world speculated, behind the walls of Buckingham Palace, the wheels of power turned. Investigations began quietly, with palace aides instructed to retrieve documents and review estate plans. Trusted legal advisors were summoned, sworn to secrecy as they pored over ledgers and legal frameworks. It was a delicate operation, one that would require absolute discretion and unwavering loyalty. For King Charles, the mission was clear: to protect his mother's legacy, no matter the cost. When King Charles stepped forward and addressed the allegations swirling around Queen Elizabeth's will, it sent shockwaves not only through the palace, but across the world. The king's message had been clear and unyielding. Any attempts to alter the queen's wishes would be met with firm resistance. But while his public statement served as a declaration of loyalty to his mother's legacy, behind the thick stone walls of Buckingham Palace, the repercussions of that speech were just beginning to unfold. The first rumblings of tension began almost immediately. Prince William, long considered the dutiful heir, was one of the first to reach out to his father after the announcement. Their conversation, though private, was described by insiders as tense but necessary. William had always been protective of his grandmother's legacy, fiercely loyal to the traditions that defined her reign. To hear that there may have been an attempt to influence her will was, to him, not just a betrayal. It was an affront to everything the monarchy stood for. William was vocal in his support for his father's decision to speak out. He reportedly expressed his relief that Charles had finally taken a stand, confiding in close aides that the silence surrounding Meghan's alleged estate inquiries had festered for far too long. "This isn't just about the will," William reportedly said to an inner circle of confidants. "It's about principle. It's about honoring Gran's memory without interference or manipulation." But while William's support for his father was steadfast, not everyone in the family shared his conviction. The Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, was notably silent following Charles's announcement. Though many expected a swift rebuttal or a public defense of his wife, there was none. Friends close to the couple suggested that Harry was deeply conflicted, torn between loyalty to his father and brother and his commitment to Meghan. For Harry, the situation was personal. He had long felt marginalized by the royal family, and now his wife was being accused, albeit indirectly, of attempting to manipulate the Queen's final wishes. Meghan, on the other hand, was not silent behind closed doors. According to sources within Montecito, she was livid. Meghan viewed Charles's announcement as a calculated attempt to undermine her credibility and her children's rightful place within the royal structure. Those close to her described intense conversations between her and Harry, where she allegedly questioned the motives behind the king's sudden decision to go public. "He's protecting the establishment," Meghan reportedly fumed during one conversation. "They want to cut us out, and this is just another way to do it." The Sussexes' allies in the media quickly picked up on Meghan's discontent, with several prominent commentators coming forward to defend her. They framed the allegations as baseless attacks aimed at further isolating the couple. Talk shows and news segments speculated that Charles's move was less about protecting the Queen's legacy and more about consolidating power now that he sat on the throne. In public discourse, opinions were sharply divided. Loyalists to the crown praised Charles for his bravery and integrity, while supporters of Meghan and Harry accused the monarchy of silencing dissent and maintaining archaic traditions at the expense of progress. Inside Buckingham Palace, the mood was somber but resolute. Princess Anne, who had been pivotal in bringing the matter to light, was seen as a beacon of tradition. Known for her no-nonsense approach and deep respect for the Queen, in support of Charles's decision was unwavering. "It had to be done," she reportedly told one of her closest aides. "This isn't about politics or appearances. This is about protecting what Mother built." Her words carried weight, and those loyal to the monarchy found solace in her commitment to the Queen's memory. However, not everyone within the royal fold was as resolute. Prince Andrew, whose position within the family had already been diminished due to past scandals, viewed the entire situation as a potential crack in the monarchy's foundation. According to sources close to the Duke of York, he privately questioned Charles's decision to make the allegations public. "This is the sort of thing that should have been handled internally," Andrew reportedly told a confidant. His concerns, however, were largely dismissed by senior royals who saw his perspective as tainted by his own fall from grace. The Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton, maintained a composed exterior, but those close to her revealed that she too was deeply troubled by the turn of events. Kate, known for her commitment to royal duty and family unity, saw the growing divide between William and Harry as a wound that might never heal. The brothers, once inseparable, now stood on opposite sides of a growing chasm. For Kate, the idea of watching her children grow up without the closeness of their cousins was heartbreaking. In private, she urged William to reach out to Harry to try and bridge the gap before it grew wider. But William, resolute in his loyalty to tradition, was not so easily swayed. The Queen consort, Camilla, was characteristically quiet during the unfolding drama. Known for her discretion and measured responses, Camilla reportedly stood by Charles's decision but cautioned against further escalation. "We must be careful," she is said to have whispered during a private dinner with Charles. "If this grows, it could tear the family apart." Her words were not lost on the king, who understood better than anyone the fragility of royal unity. Public reaction to the royal divide was immediate and polarized. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, some waving Union Jacks in support of King Charles's decision, while others held signs denouncing what they called a smear campaign against Meghan. Social media became a battleground of opinions, with hashtags like #ProtectTheQueen and #StandWithMeghan trending simultaneously. Polls showed a divided nation, one half applauding Charles's bravery, the other condemning what they saw as an archaic attempt to silence modernization within the monarchy. Amidst the public outcry, preparations were quietly being made for a deeper investigation into estate planning and the handling of royal wills. King Charles, with the support of Princess Anne, ordered a formal audit of estate discussions spanning back 5 years. The move, though discreet, sent a clear message. Any attempts to influence the Queen's final wishes would be uncovered and addressed. The investigation would be handled internally, with only the most trusted legal advisors and estate managers involved. For Meghan and Harry, the audit marked a turning point. Harry, who had once stood beside his brother and father in unity, now found himself on the outside looking in. Sources close to the couple suggested that Meghan saw the audit as a direct attack, a means of further alienating her from the royal establishment. In private, she expressed concerns about what would be found and how it would be presented to the public. Harry, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his lingering ties to his family, grew more withdrawn. The divide within the royal family was now more apparent than ever. King Charles and Princess Anne stood firmly in defense of the Queen's legacy, determined to root out any sign of manipulation. Prince William, fiercely protective of tradition, aligned himself with his father's mission, while Harry and Meghan found themselves increasingly isolated, their ambitions now under scrutiny. As the audit progressed and palace officials began to sift through years of documentation, tensions only deepened. Trust within the family was fractured, and the line between loyalty and betrayal became increasingly blurred. For King Charles, the path forward was clear: preserve the sanctity of his mother's wishes at all costs. For Meghan and Harry, the battle was just beginning, a fight not only for legitimacy but for their very place within the royal narrative. The royal family, once seen as an unbreakable pillar of unity, now faced its greatest test in decades. And as the investigation continued, it became increasingly evident that there would be no turning back. In the days following King Charles's unprecedented announcement, the world waited with bated breath for Meghan and Harry's response. Royal insiders speculated that the Sussexes were preparing a strong rebuttal, while commentators on both sides of the Atlantic braced themselves for what was sure to be an explosive exchange. Yet, for days, there was only silence. Montecito, typically buzzing with the activity of public relations and media engagements, seemed uncharacteristically quiet. Reporters camped outside the gates of their estate, cameras ready, microphones extended, but neither Meghan nor Harry emerged. The anticipation grew with each passing hour. Supporters of Meghan and Harry took to social media, demanding answers, while royal loyalists insisted that silence was an admission of guilt. Headlines splashed across tabloids speculated wildly. Did Meghan really try to alter the Queen's will? Palace insiders reveal secret estate meetings. But still, Montecito remained silent. It wasn't until nearly a week after Charles's announcement that the Sussexes finally broke their silence, through a meticulously crafted statement released by their public relations team. The statement, delivered in the cool, polished tone typical of their media responses, categorically denied any attempts to influence Queen Elizabeth II's will. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex categorically deny the baseless allegations suggesting that there was any attempt to alter or influence the private wishes of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, it read. Such claims are not only false but are part of a broader narrative designed to undermine the character and integrity of the Duchess of Sussex. The statement went on to address the accusations directly, accusing palace insiders of manufacturing rumors to discredit Meghan. It highlighted the timing of the allegations, pointing out that they came just as Meghan and Harry were preparing to launch new charitable initiatives and media projects. The timing of these accusations is no coincidence, the statement continued. It is a targeted attempt to disrupt the positive work the Duke and Duchess have been focused on since stepping back from royal duties. Despite the confident denial, reactions were mixed. In the UK, where royal tradition is still deeply revered, the statement was met with skepticism. Commentators on major news networks dissected each line, questioning the authenticity of Meghan and Harry's claims. It's one thing to deny, one prominent royal commentator noted, but it's another thing entirely to explain why these meetings happened in the first place. If there was no interest in the Queen's estate, why were there so many private discussions with estate managers? In the United States, however, the reception was markedly different. High-profile celebrities and activists took to social media to defend Meghan, condemning what they saw as yet another smear campaign orchestrated by the British establishment. Talk show hosts discussed the matter with a tone of disbelief, painting Meghan as a victim of royal rigidity and outdated traditions. This is the kind of thing that happens when you try to break away from centuries of control, one prominent figure stated during a morning broadcast. They don't want to let you go, and if you try, they'll come for your reputation. Meanwhile, inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, Meghan and Harry's denial did little to ease tensions. If anything, it solidified the lines that had already been drawn. Princess Anne, who had been instrumental in uncovering the alleged meetings, reportedly dismissed the statement as predictable. According to sources close to the Princess Royal, she saw the Sussexes' response as nothing more than a calculated move to shift blame and garner public sympathy. Of course they deny it, she reportedly confided to a close aide. But denial is easy when the evidence is buried beneath layers of secrecy. King Charles, too, was unmoved by Meghan and Harry's response. In fact, those close to the monarch revealed that their statement only furthered his resolve to press forward with the investigation. Charles, who had been known for his patience and diplomatic handling of family disputes, was uncharacteristically direct in his response to advisors. "This isn't just about what was said," he reportedly stated during a private meeting. "It's about what was done. We need clarity. We need answers." And so, the investigation continued. Estate managers were quietly interviewed. Ledgers and legal documents were pulled from dusty archives, and the circle of trust within the palace grew tighter. Princess Anne, who had always been known for her discretion, was particularly instrumental in guiding the inquiry. Her knowledge of estate planning, combined with her sharp instincts, allowed the investigation to move swiftly and silently. Legal advisors were brought in to oversee the process, ensuring that any findings would be irrefutable and protected from public scrutiny until the appropriate time. But if Meghan and Harry were rattled by the escalating investigation, they did not show it. In fact, just days after releasing their public statement, the Sussexes appeared at a charity event in California, smiling and poised as they greeted supporters and posed for photographs. Meghan, dressed elegantly in a tailored suit, spoke passionately about the importance of family unity and the power of community. To many watching, it was a calculated move, a display of strength in the face of controversy. Media outlets around the world picked up on the appearance, analyzing Meghan's every gesture and Harry's every smile. Some saw it as a masterclass in public relations, a defiant stand against what they perceived as royal persecution. Others viewed it as a thinly veiled attempt to distract from the growing scrutiny back in the UK. Yet, through it all, Meghan and Harry maintained their innocence, insisting that the allegations were nothing more than vindictive slander. Behind palace walls, however, the investigation was beginning to yield results. A particular thread that caught the attention of investigators involved a series of confidential meetings held at Sandringham Estate just months before the Queen's passing. Estate managers interviewed under strict confidentiality revealed that Meghan had indeed made inquiries about certain properties, specifically Sandringham and Balmoral. She had, according to one estate manager, asked pointed questions about the valuation of these estates and the legal frameworks governing their transfer. When pressed further, the estate manager admitted that Meghan had suggested a more modernized approach to estate planning, one that might consider adjustments to traditional inheritance practices. The admission, though cautiously phrased, was enough to send shockwaves through the investigation team. It was the first solid confirmation that Meghan had, at the very least, expressed interest in modifying how royal estates were managed. The news was relayed directly to King Charles and Princess Anne. Both were reportedly stunned but unsurprised. For Charles, it was a grim vindication of his decision to speak out. For Anne, it was proof that her instincts had been right all along. The investigation continued with renewed vigor, expanding its scope to include electronic correspondences, meeting notes, and financial transactions tied to estate planning. Meghan and Harry's team, catching wind of the growing inquiry, doubled down on their defense. Lawyers representing the Sussexes fired off a letter to Buckingham Palace, demanding transparency and accusing the monarchy of conducting a smear campaign designed to vilify and isolate. The letter, which was leaked to the press, sparked yet another wave of controversy. Royal aides, speaking on the condition of anonymity, described the letter as desperate and misguided. But Meghan and Harry stood firm, insisting that the investigation was a targeted attack designed to strip their children of their rightful place within the royal family. For King Charles, the stakes could not have been higher. The investigation had grown beyond just the estate managers and financial records. It had become a matter of royal integrity. With Princess Anne at his side, Charles vowed to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. In private, he reportedly confided to Anne, "We must protect Mother's legacy. This is not just about estates. It's about respect." As the investigation pressed on and the divide between the Sussexes and the rest of the royal family deepened, the world watched with unblinking eyes. The next move belonged to King Charles. And it would determine not just the future of the monarchy, but the legacy of Queen Elizabeth herself. As the investigation into Meghan's alleged attempts to influence Queen Elizabeth II will deepen, the ramifications stretched far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. What had started as whispers of estate manipulation had now grown into a full-blown inquiry, complete with legal ramifications and a media storm that showed no signs of slowing. The monarchy, typically shielded from the turbulence of public scandal, now found itself at the epicenter of a legal and reputational earthquake. The first sign of legal trouble came when Buckingham Palace announced that it would be conducting a formal review of all estate planning and inheritance decisions made during the last 5 years of Queen Elizabeth's life. This announcement was not just a formality. It signaled that King Charles and Princess Anne were prepared to dig deep into financial records, meeting minutes, and estate management decisions that had long been kept confidential. Legal experts quickly weighed in on the announcement, with many pointing out that any attempt to alter the Queen's will, especially if done under duress or coercion, could constitute a serious legal offense. British law is clear when it comes to wills and estate planning. Any attempt to manipulate or coerce changes to a legal testament, especially one as significant as that of a reigning monarch, can result in criminal prosecution. Inheritance fraud, undue influence, and conspiracy to defraud are just some of the legal terms that began to swirl around the investigation. Prominent legal commentators speculated that if Meghan's involvement were proven, she could face not just public scrutiny, but legal action that could tarnish her reputation